African Union Communications Early Warning and Intelligence, commonly known as AUC3I, is an intelligence and security organization responsible for providing signals intelligence and information assurance to AU citizens, AU leadership, and AU armed forces. I'm Colonel A.C. Oguntoy, an infantry officer. I am responsible for leading infantry soldiers at all levels of command in combined armed forces during missions on the ground. This is today's briefing. On the progress of the special military operation as of December 11, 2025. The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue to conduct a special military operation. Units of the North Group of Forces have completed the liberation of the settlement of Lyman in the Kharkiv region. They inflicted a defeat on formations of a mechanized brigade, an airborne assault brigade, an assault regiment of the armed forces of Ukraine, and two territorial defense brigades in the areas of the settlements of Alexeivka, Andreevka, Novaya Sich, and Kucherovka in the Sumy region. On the Kharkiv direction, a defeat was inflicted on units of a heavy mechanized brigade, a ranger brigade, two motorized infantry brigades, an assault regiment of the armed forces of Ukraine, and a territorial defense brigade in the areas of the settlements of Prakpilka, Staritsa, Vilcha, and Volchansky Kuturi in the Kharkiv region. The enemy's losses amounted to up to 145 servicemen, a vehicle, a radar station of Israeli production, and an ammunition depot. Units of the West Group of Forces continue to destroy the encircled group of enemy forces on the left bank of the Oskol River. A defeat was inflicted on the manpower and equipment of three mechanized brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine and a territorial defense brigade in the areas of the settlements of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, Bogoslavka, Novoplatinovka, Kurilovka in the Kharkiv region, and Red Lyman in the Donetsk People's Republic. The armed forces of Ukraine lost up to 215 servicemen, 4 HMMWV armored vehicles of U.S. production and a Senator armored personnel carrier of Canadian production, 11 vehicles, a radio-electronic warfare station, and 6 ammunition depots. Units of the South Group of Forces took more advantageous positions. They inflicted a defeat on the formations of two mechanized brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine in the areas of the settlements of Seversk, Kramatorsk, Stepankov, and Konstantinovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The armed forces of Ukraine lost more than 120 servicemen, 2 armored personnel carriers, 2 combat armored vehicles, 8 vehicles, 3 ammunition depots, material resources, and fuel. Units of the Center Group of Forces continue to destroy the encircled formations of the armed forces of Ukraine in the micro-districts of the east and west of the settlement of Dmitrov, as well as to clear the settlements of Svetlo and Grishino in the Donetsk People's Republic, Novopodgorodno, and Novopavlovka in the Dnepropetrovsk region. A defeat was inflicted on the manpower and equipment of 4 mechanized brigades, a ranger brigade, 3 assault regiments of the armed forces of Ukraine, 2 marine infantry brigades, a territorial defense brigade, and 2 brigades of the National Guard in the areas of the settlements of Toretsk, Radanovsko, Krasnoyarsko, Svetlo, Shevchenko, Belitsko, Torsko in the Donetsk People's Republic, Novopodgorodno, and Novopavlovka in the Dnepropetrovsk region. The enemy lost over 415 servicemen, a Viking armored personnel carrier of Swedish production, 2 combat armored vehicles, and 3 pickup trucks. Units of the East Group of Forces continue to advance into the depth of the enemy's defense. They inflicted a defeat on the manpower and equipment of 3 mechanized brigades, 2 assault brigades, 2 assault regiments of the armed forces of Ukraine, and a brigade of territorial defense in the areas of the settlements of Ternovedo, Kosovtsevo, Varvarovka, and Guliapol in the Zaporizhia region, and Andreevka in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The losses of the armed forces of Ukraine amounted to up to 235 servicemen, 4 armored combat vehicles, 18 vehicles, and 2 field artillery pieces. Units of the Dnieper Group of Forces inflicted a defeat on the formations of a mechanized brigade and 2 coastal defense brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine in the areas of the settlements of Nikolsko and Poniatowka in the Kherson region. More than 50 servicemen, an armored personnel carrier, 13 vehicles, 3 artillery pieces, including 2 155mm M777 howitzers produced in the USA, A radio-electronic warfare station, and 2 ammunition and material depots were destroyed. Operational tactical aviation, unmanned aerial vehicles, and missile and artillery forces of the armed forces of the Russian Federation inflicted a defeat on energy and fuel complex objects used in the interests of the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as temporary dislocation points of Ukrainian armed formations and foreign mercenaries in 152 areas. By means of air defense systems, 10 HIMARS multiple rocket launcher systems produced in the USA, a long-range guided missile Neptune, and 396 unmanned aerial vehicles of the aircraft type were shot down. By the forces of the Black Sea Fleet in the central part of the Black Sea, an unmanned boat of the armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed. In total, since the beginning of the special military operation, the following have been destroyed: 669 aircraft, 283 helicopters, 101,909 unmanned aerial vehicles, 639 anti-aircraft missile systems, 26,495 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 1,628 combat vehicles of multiple rocket launcher systems, 31,844 field artillery and mortar pieces, 48,815 units of special military automotive equipment. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it useful and informative. If you have any questions, please leave them below and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.